The moment that cost her everything, the garage went quiet in a way that felt violent. Engines idled, radios hissed, and every eye locked onto her as the manager's voice sliced through the air. He didn't lower it. He wanted witnesses. He wanted shame, holding up a work order like a verdict. He accused her of theft, of giving away company labor, of deciding who deserved help. Charity, he snapped, was not policy. She stood frozen, grease on her hands, heart hammering, trying to explain, but the words collapsed under his glare. Coworkers stared at the floor, suddenly invisible, too scared to speak. No one asked why. No one defended her. The sentence came fast and loud. "You're fired." Near the door, the elderly woman she'd helped trembled, clutching her purse, whispering, "Apologies." The manager waved her away, rewriting the story to protect himself as she packed her tools and walked past rows of lifted cars. Humiliation burned hotter than any engine. She believed this was the end. But what no one in that garage knew was who she really was, or what this act of kindness was about to unleash. She had learned early not to take up space. In a world that taught women like her to keep their heads down, she found pride in work, not applause. Every morning she arrived before sunrise, unlocking the garage with the same quiet ritual, tying her hair back, pulling on gloves already stained by yesterday's labor. To most people, she was just another mechanic. To herself, she was something simpler, someone who fixed what was broken. Her life was measured in small disciplines. Show up early, do the job right, charge fair, look people in the eye. She didn't argue with customers or boast about skills. She listened. She noticed the fear behind trembling hands, the relief when an engine finally turned over. She knew what it meant to depend on a machine you couldn't afford to replace, because she had lived that dependency herself. Outwardly, her world was modest: a rented room, a second-hand phone, long shifts that left her exhausted and invisible. But inside her lived an unshakable code. She believed dignity wasn't something you waited to be given. It was something you practiced, even when no one was watching. There were nights she went home sore and broke, scrolling past headlines about systems that rewarded cruelty and punished compassion. She never commented, never shouted. She had learned that real resistance didn't always look loud. Sometimes it looked like competence, like patience, like refusing to harden. That what no one in that garage understood was that this wasn't her first test of character. She had survived worse rooms, heavier pressure, higher stakes. This job was never her destination. It was a chapter, and she thought fixing that car would end her day, not rewrite her life. She just didn't know the world was about to notice her silence at last. The villain rules without humanity. He liked to call himself practical. That was the word he used when he cut corners on compassion and dressed cruelty up as discipline. In his mind, the garage wasn't a workplace. It was a brand, and brands survived on numbers, not names. Every conversation bent back toward profit. Every decision was filtered through optics and liability and control. He spoke a language of rules the way others spoke faith. Policy was sacred. Exceptions were weakness. People were replaceable parts, no different from bolts or belts, valuable only as long as they performed without complaint. When he walked the floor, he didn't see effort or fatigue. He saw margins. He saw risk. He saw threats to authority. To him, kindness was chaos. A free repair wasn't generosity. It was theft. A woman helping an old immigrant who couldn't pay wasn't humane. It was insubordination. He never asked why she did it, because why didn't matter. Power did. Order did. The image of control mattered more than the reality of justice. He believed the world worked best when people knew their place, especially those who came from less, who spoke softly, who didn't belong to the circles he moved in. He mistook her silence for weakness, her humility for ignorance. He thought rules made him righteous. What he never understood was that systems without humanity eventually expose themselves. And by choosing policy over people, he didn't just fire a mechanic, he declared a philosophy. One that would soon be tested, questioned, and torn apart in ways he never imagined. He smiled when enforcing consequences, convinced firmness equaled fairness, unaware that history rarely remembers managers kindly, but always remembers who chose mercy when power demanded obedience, and who punished empathy to protect a fragile sense of dominance. Fear was his favorite management tool. The old lady in the broken car, she remembered the sound before anything else. The cough of an engine refusing to start, echoing too loud in an empty parking lot. The old woman stood beside the car, small against the steel and concrete hands, shaking as she tried the key again. Her accent thickened with fear as she asked for help, apologizing before anyone accused her of asking for too much. Others passed by. They always did. Some avoided her eyes. Some pretended not to hear. The hero noticed the details they ignored. The worn shoes, the careful way the woman folded her documents, the panic of someone who knew a single breakdown could undo an entire week's survival. She asked one question, then another, listening more than speaking. The problem was simple: a loose connection. Minutes of work. The solution was clear. The policy was clearer. No free labor, no exceptions. She felt the weight of that rule pressing against something deeper, older, heavier. She thought of her own grandmother, of long nights when help came late or not at all, of how dignity can collapse faster than machinery. She made the choice quietly. No announcement, no heroics, just steady hands and focused breath. When the engine turned over, relief flooded the old woman's face, gratitude spilling out in broken sentences and trembling smiles. She tried to pay anyway, counting small bills with embarrassed care. The hero closed the hood and shook her head. Today, she said gently, was already paid for. Around them, the garage hummed with routine indifference, cameras blinking, footsteps, pause in the shadow, lingering longer than necessary. Authority listening for mistakes, waiting for proof that compassion could be punished, that mercy could be turned into an example. Every choice carries consequences, even the ones made quietly. Today she didn't know someone was watching. Public humiliation in sudden fall. Everyone felt it when his voice rose again, louder, sharper, rehearsed for dominance. He repeated the charge as if volume could turn policy into truth. She stood there while he listed violations, eyes scanning the room for allies that never came. Wrenches stopped mid-or, jokes died unfinished, fear settled like dust. The old woman stepped forward, clutching her purse, trying to explain that she had begged, that the repair was small, that she would return with payment. He cut her off without looking, dismissing her with a flick of the wrist, reminding her this was a business, not a charity. The words landed heavy, aimed to instruct everyone watching. He told the hero to hand in her badge, to clear her locker, to leave immediately. Each command was a performance, a warning to the room. She felt heat rush her face, then calm, the kind that comes when choices are stripped away. She didn't argue, she didn't plead. She nodded once. As she gathered her tools, co-workers avoided her eyes, ashamed of their silence, grateful it wasn't them. The old woman whispered apologies, tears streaking lines through powder. The hero squeezed her hand, steady, reassuring, as if she were the one with power. She walked past the bay doors into daylight, carrying a small metal box that held her livelihood. Engines roared behind her, life resuming without pause. In seconds, a career elapsed, reduced to a lesson about obedience. Phones buzzed in pockets, cameras glanced up, and a rumor took its first breath, moving faster than fear, stitching witnesses together, carrying outrage beyond the walls, toward streets, timelines, kitchens, and conversations that refused to stay quiet. Her name lingered in the air, misunderstood now, but destined to be reclaimed soon publicly. But the story didn't end in that parking lot. A kindness that refused to stay quiet. By the evening, the old woman was home, shaking in her favorite chair, recounting every detail to her daughter and grandson. Her voice trembled not from fear, but from disbelief at the cruelty she had witnessed. The story spilled into the room like fire, igniting indignation in those who listened. Her family's faces hardened with anger, their hands clenching at the thought of someone punished for helping another human being. Within hours, her daughter typed the story into her phone, simple words, heartfelt truth, nothing exaggerated. A photograph of the hero smiling by the repaired car, grease-stained hands folded gently, accompanied the post. The phone buzzed instantly. Notifications multiplied as friends shared it, adding their own disbelief and frustration. Comments poured in, "This is what's wrong with society. She helped someone, and they fired her. Where is the humanity?" The post grew faster than anyone expected. People identified with the hero, admiring her humility, her courage to act when others would stay silent. Online, strangers debated, tagged friends, and amplified the injustice. Every share carried a spark, a reminder that empathy existed even when power tried to crush it. What had begun as a quiet act in a garage now rippled across timelines, across neighborhoods, across continents, challenging viewers to confront their own complicity in ignoring small cruelties in the midst of virtual outrage. The hero remained unaware. She returned home quietly, exhausted, replaying the day in her mind. She had acted without expectation, and yet the world had begun to notice. Kindness, she realized, has a way of refusing to stay quiet, of demanding attention even when those in authority wish it could be silenced. And in the echo of notifications and shared outrage, a subtle truth began to form. The consequences of this single act would not stop with her. The past she never spoke about. Few knew her story. Fewer still understood the weight she carried beneath a grease-stained jacket and quiet demeanor. She had grown up in a neighborhood where opportunity was rare and survival was a lesson learned early. Nights spent repairing her mother's old sedan weren't practice, they were necessity. Lows had shaped her, discipline had tempered her, and sacrifice had become second nature. Every skill she honed came at a cost, every lesson etched into her hands and spine. She carried credentials that few would believe. Advanced engineering certifications earned while juggling multiple jobs, high-level apprenticeships under mentors who demanded perfection, and even stints in fields where precision could mean life or death, yet none of it was ever flaunted. She had learned that talent is not validation, character is. She had walked away from recognition before, choosing principle over praise. Integrity over profit. When the elderly woman's car refused to start, she saw more than a broken engine. She saw struggle, vulnerability, and the quiet dignity of someone trying to survive without complaint. Charging her would have been easy. Following policy would have been simple. But she didn't. Every calculation in her mind, every principle she had ever lived by, pointed to the same conclusion. Some acts transcend rules. Some acts honor a humanity that cannot be measured in dollars. She didn't fix the car for free because she sought reward, because she sought recognition, or because she thought Anyan the internet starts asking questions within hours. The story had migrated from personal posts to broader forums, and the quiet ripples became waves. Strangers began digging, piecing together fragments of a life that didn't match the tidy narrative the employer had presented. Old forum posts, certifications, tucked away on forgotten profiles, references from mentors long retired, each link hinted at a depth no one had anticipated. The hero's name surfaced in corners of the web reserved for excellence, places where skill and discipline were currency and respect was earned through action. Not talk. Amateur investigators compared timelines, traced her work history, and uncovered inconsistencies in the company's account. Whispers turned into debates. How could someone fired for minor charity have credentials that rivaled entire departments? How could a mechanic dismissed as inexperienced appear in reports on high-stakes projects? Every new discovery chipped away at the carefully constructed story the boss had sold to witnesses, coworkers, and social media alike. The narrative the company had woven began to unravel, thread by thread. Online communities rallied, dissecting the logic, questioning the motives, and calling out hypocrisy. Comments became voices of outrage. They punished someone for doing the right thing. This isn't just unfair, it's shameful. Even neutral observers felt a shiver of disbelief. And then one detail stopped everyone cold. E would notice. She did it because money was never the issue. The truth comes out when the final pieces fell into place. The world paused. The hero, the quiet mechanic dismissed for compassion, was no ordinary worker. Records surfaced, showing she had once been part of elite engineering teams, designing systems that demanded precision, innovation, and courage under pressure. Her name appeared in reports few civilians had ever seen, tied to projects that shaped industries and, in some cases, saved lives. Journalists pieced together her history, tracing a journey few could have imagined. Accolades quietly earned contracts. Fulfilled with brilliance, recognition refused because she valued principle over promotion. She had walked away from wealth, from status, from a life where comfort could have insulated her from struggle, choosing instead to live by the values that now had cost her everything in that garage. The revelations sent shockwaves through the online communities that had been following her story. Viewers replayed every image, every comment, every moment of the viral post, suddenly seeing the humility and restraint for what it truly was, the mark of someone who had known power but never let it define her. Respect replaced outrage. Admiration replaced pity. People who had debated the morality of her firing now found themselves in awe of the woman who had acted with courage while knowing the risks. Then came the most astonishing connection of all. The old woman, trembling and tearful in that packing lot, was not a stranger. Years earlier, she had intervened in a moment of crisis, helping the hero navigate a dangerous situation that could have ended her career or her life. The free repair was not a simple act of kindness. It was repayment, a gesture rooted in gratitude, recognition, and the understanding that some debts cannot be measured in money. Silence spread across comment threads, newsrooms, and forums as people absorbed the full scope of the story. Shock gave way to respect, and respect quickly morphed into inspiration. This was no longer about a fired mechanic or a small act of generosity. It was about integrity, courage, and the quiet power of choosing humanity over profit. Every word, every share, every conversation carried the weight of that truth. For the first time, her silence became a statement. Her humility became a declaration, and the world, which had once dismissed her, could not turn away. When the crowd turns once the truth was out, the reaction was immediate and merciless. Social media timelines flooded with outrage, each share multiplying the reach of a story that had begun quietly but now refused to be ignored. People tagged friends, colleagues, and local news outlets, demanding accountability. Comments poured in. How can anyone fire someone for helping another human being? This is the definition of cruelty masquerading as policy. She represents everything our society claims to value but fails to protect. The company, once confident in its authority, found itself under siege. Emails, calls, and online reviews attacked not just the firing but the culture it represented. Corporate spokespeople scrambled to issue statements, but each word felt hollow, reactive, defensive. The boss, who had once ruled the garage floor with absolute certainty, now walked through the halls with a weight he had never known. Every glance from coworkers, every whispered conversation, reminded him that the narrative was no longer his to control. Mainstream media caught wind of the story. framing it as a tale of integrity over greed, of courage over compliance. News segments replayed footage of the hero's calm defiance, her hands folded over grease-stained gloves, her eyes steady despite humiliation. Interviews with witnesses, commentary from ethicists, and threads dissecting the company's actions created a storm that forced the narrative from a local grievance to a national debate. Headlines declared a reckoning was underway. The old woman appeared in interviews, her voice trembling but firm, adding weight to the revelation that this had never been about policy or profit. It had always been about humanity. The public rallied behind the hero, and in the court of public opinion, she had already won. Support poured in from unexpected places, rival businesses praising her ethics, former colleagues sharing their own hidden stories of injustice, even social media influencers amplifying the message. And yet, amid the swelling tide of support, the hero remained aware that true justice had not yet arrived. The company faced scrutiny, the boss faced embarrassment, but the consequences for those who had wielded cruelty as policy were still uncertain. The world watched, waiting for the scales to tip, for accountability to finally match the outrage. But justice still hadn't been served. Redemption, consequences, and a new beginning. The company eventually reached out, offering apologies, severance, and restitution. Each word carefully measured, each gesture calculated to contain the damage. They assumed an apology and compensation would be enough to quiet the storm. But the hero, who had lived by principles far beyond policy, understood that her worth was not negotiable and her dignity could not be bought. She declined the offers quietly, politely, her answer carrying the weight of someone who had always known her own value. The boss faced consequences more public than he could have anticipated. Investigations into company practices began. Employees shared stories of mistreatment that had long been ignored, and corporate oversight scrutinized policies that elevated profit over people. The humiliation he had once wielded like a weapon returned to him multiplied, his reputation crumbling in the glare of the very public he had once assumed would remain indifferent. He learned, too late, that power without conscience leaves a trail that cannot be erased. The old woman waited, watching the young hero navigate the storm with calm assurance. When they met again, it was not a reunion of savior and recipient, but to lives connected by respect, empathy, and unspoken understanding. The hero knelt beside the woman, their hands brushing over the hood of the repaired car, the weight of what had happened settling quietly between them. No words were necessary. Gratitude, admiration, and shared humanity filled the space that had once been tension, fear, and misunderstanding in the days that followed. The hero began a new chapter, on her own terms. She opened a small, community-focused garage where skill met compassion, where she could mentor others who had been overlooked, underestimated, or silenced. People came for repairs, yes, but they stayed for guidance, for the assurance that integrity and care could coexist with competence and professionalism. Her life, once measured in hours and tasks, expanded into something more profound. Purpose. The media, still captivated, documented her journey not as a story of revenge but as a tale of resilience. Online threads that had begun with outrage now celebrated strategy, ethics, and quiet strength. She had refused to be defined by the cruelty of another. Instead, she became a symbol of what it looks like to stand by principles in a world that often rewards expedience over morality. And through it all, the hero understood something essential. True victory is not in punishing those who wronged you, but in living a life that cannot be broken by their choices. Her dignity, preserved and unshaken, became a beacon for those who witnessed her journey. Pride was no longer necessary. Purpose carried the weight of meaning. The garage thrived, the community flourished, and every act of kindness she offered, whether paid or unpaid, became part of a legacy larger than any one career, any single decision, or any fleeting moment of fame. In the quiet after the storm, she looked toward the horizon, recognizing that every choice, every risk taken for humanity, rather than reward, had led to this point. Justice had been served not through vengeance, but through consequence, courage, and the unyielding pursuit of what is right. And in that knowledge, she found freedom, purpose, and peace. The lesson that hit a nation. The story spread beyond garages, social media feeds, and local headlines. It reached boardrooms, living rooms, classrooms, anywhere people paused to consider what it meant to act with integrity when the system rewarded indifference. People debated policies, shared opinions, and argued over rules. But beneath it all, one truth resonated. Character matters more than profit. Compassion matters more than procedure. Courage matters more than compliance. One simple act of kindness, offered without expectation or reward, had exposed a system willing to punish humanity. It reminded a nation that policies are made by people, and people can choose empathy over It reminded communities that strength is not always loud, that heroes often work in silence, and that dignity is preserved through principle, not applause. In the end, the hero's quiet courage became a mirror for society, a reflection of what is possible when morality guides action, when compassion outweighs convenience, And when one person's integrity ignites collective conscience, true value is never measured in dollars or status. It is measured in choices, in courage, in the unseen, acts that ripple far beyond the moment. And in that ripple, a nation remembered what it had almost forgotten: to see humanity first.